Yeah, so here's an example. I'm trying to train one that's a doctor to talk to a certain type of patient. And we first trained the model with just tons of medical data. And it came out sounding really unhuman and kind of nerdy, and it didn't put things in a warm tone of voice. So we took this other data set that's called the PILE data set, and it's just warm, really positive English language communication. So we kind of mixed in 30% of the data set as that data set. And then it was a really good doctor that was personable and had good manners and that kind of stuff.
Live. I just threw it on right now.
Yeah, it does. It learns. It learns quite a bit about ideas and how they connect. There's other things too, like if you. Well, the souls can't because that's just prompting, but the fine tuning can.
Yeah, I'm ready for whatever. Hello.
Cool.
Are we streaming?
Hello.
We are live. We're live right now.
I was
Welcome
giving all my
to Hack
secrets
Sunday.
out,
Wait.
Jerry.
Oh, fuck.
What's
we're
that?
live.
Just
API
kidding.
key. Fuck.
Watch that language. She's for live.
Sorry.
Welcome to Hack Sunday. A lot of familiar faces today. Obviously, today's Super Bowl Sunday. Thank you for joining us here. Yes, we are nerds, and this does take priority, but Super Bowl's afterwards anyway, so we'll be good. Join us every Sunday. We do AI programming here. Today, we've got a very fun little project. This is one I've been waiting for a long time. We're going to do some fine-tuning of Rick and Morty models.
Woo!
Led by my friends here, Kenneth and Stanley. And with that, I'll let you guys take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Jerry, and big round of applause to Jerry too for just getting everything set up here and getting everything badass, and to Trick as well. And as mentioned, happy Super Bowl Sunday, and it'll be a little bit of a extra hacky hack Sunday because last week, as you might remember, we reviewed the theory and kind of technical details behind what is called the fine-tuning of open large language models. And I like to say that's when you give a model a master's degree. And that's to sort of indicate that these models do come off the shelf with a lot in their heads. But then if you want them to be very good at a specific task, or if you want them to sound like a specific person, there's this kind of extra training that you do called fine-tuning. And then as a kind of fun exercise, Ken and I thought it would be cool to have some AIs write an episode of Rick and Morty, one of our favorite shows. So Ken has actually grabbed the Rick and Morty data set from Hugging Face. And what you can see him doing on the screen here is chopping it up as what is called a fine-tuning payload. So essentially we take a large set of things that Morty said to Rick, so prompt and response, and things that Rick said back to Morty. And then that is our fine-tuning set. This notebook we will be sharing, and our hope is that you guys will be able to create your own fine-tuning sets. And then we'll be able to create and sort of explore how some of these models work together. But where would we get data for an interesting fine-tuning set, and what might we want to do? Well, first thing I would say is if you search interesting Hugging Face fine-tuning data sets, there are entire libraries of incredible things. So that's actually where we got this Rick and Morty data set. You can probably find a Hugging Face fine-tuning set for any cartoon show or television show that you like that's constructed from the scripts. And then there's any number of other really interesting fine-tuning sets out there. And actually, a lot of the fun kind of comes from mixing and matching. What sort of components of the data set, and then observing how the model sounds, and then kind of going back and tweaking things and changing things around. And then one last thing that's kind of fun to share is if you have any of your own data, like if you have your text messages and you wanted to work with that data, or maybe you had a friend and you had a bunch of conversation between you and your friend, we could also process that into a fine-tuning payload. And again, for some of you people who are involved in like Web3 community, like my friend Saint over here, if you pull, say, like the general chat of your Discord, that could be a fine-tuning payload. So you could train an AI that sounds just like your community. So anyway, I think this stuff will be so fun to explore. And then for today, we'll be kind of getting all the code working and the notebook shared. And then, our goal for next week will be for us to actually be talking to some AIs live. So anyway, with all that blah, blah, blah being said, Ken, is there any chance you might want to kind of walk through what you're working on with the streamer?
Sure, absolutely. So right now, and I'll restart from the beginning. I just realized that the Rick and Morty data set only has a train split, not a test split. So we're going to have to create a test split ourselves. No big deal. It's pretty easy to do, but I'm just adding a cell here so we could remember to do that part. And now I could probably, is there maybe a way I could share this notebook pretty easily because it's safe to share? The keys
Absolutely. I would say make it public, and then let's see if we can get it
okay.
at least to the audience. And Jerry, one fun thing too is Ken and I were just getting this notebook and the previous Hack Sunday notebooks like ready to go on GitHub. So maybe that can be a part of how we get kind of organize the website moving forward. Like, go to GitHub, find the notebooks. Woo! Any Google Colab fans in the audience? I have to say, it's very funny looking up and seeing like the Vision Pro users kind of slightly protruding into this universe.
Okay, so give me a second here. Telegram is on my phone, not my laptop.
I have recently been building out a similar platform, similar to Google Colab for a client, and so I haven't actually been on Google Colab too much lately.
It
They
is amazing.
upgraded a bunch of stuff, guys. Wow.
Yeah, they have. So only recently they just got co-pilots. I guess it's based off Bard, or they're not even calling it Bard anymore. It's now just Gemini, right?
I have to say, like, the focus group evaluations of Bard must have come back so negative. Like, they have ditched Bard on everything so fast. It's all Gemini now. But yeah, it looks like they have integrated. It doesn't. I was goofing around with it a little bit. It doesn't look like it's the Gemini Ultra model, but it looks like it's one of the mid-level Geminis fine-tuned for coding, and works very well. And it is really amazing to actually have in the notebook a chat agent. It's a pretty interesting glimpse of our IDEs of the future.
Especially if you're like using this for learning purposes, like just to be able to have that to quickly like get the right syntax or something is just like such a huge time saver. I'll say that for Copilot too, but just, you couldn't share VS Code, so having it in Collab is awesome. They also added keys, which is pretty important here. It's why I could easily share this notebook because you need to use any scale and have an API key for that. And instead of just having my key somewhere in this notebook or having to set up some weird Google Drive integration that pulls in the keys, I actually could just embed the keys here and give it notebook access, name the key, and then you paste your key there. And I'll show you guys how to grab a key. But right now, I just dropped in this notebook in the Telegram space. What is it called? A space? A chat? Community?
The blah, blah, blah.
So yeah, you could go in it, you could open it up, and then you'll have to copy it yourself because you can't directly edit the one that I shared. So copy a version for yourself. And then when you do that, the instructions are not super great in there yet, but I'm working on it. The main thing that you'll want to do is at the top, there's a link to grab your AnyScale key. And I'll show you how to do that really quick.
Enormous AnyScale fanboy. Like it's almost embarrassing. I do consulting on these topics for large scale corporations, and it was actually kind of funny. I was on a consulting call last week, and the client got really upset with me because I was just saying too much positive about AnyScale, and I didn't really seem interested in talking about the other platforms. But I'm objectively correct. AnyScale, like, uniquely powerful platform. AnyScale, the company, creates an open source toolset called Ray. And if you're interested in working on large language models seriously, Ray is the technology to work with. It's really incredible. What Ray is kind of trained for is getting many GPUs working together on the same problem. And that is required for fine tuning because For example, fine-tuning the bigger models that we'll be doing with this notebook will require usually maybe 8 GPUs working together. And the kind of jump in complexity of setting up a single machine to run these kind of jobs to, multiple machines and making sure that the data kind of travels between the right machines, it's an extra zero on your salary kind of jump up in expertise.
So I realized the link wasn't perfect. You had to do some weird clicking to get to the right page. So I did just update it. If you already downloaded it, the correct link is https, the stuff, app.endpoints.anyscale.com/welcome. And then you just put in your email here. You hit submit, and then it's going to have you create an account like that, and you say create account. And if you notice here, it says sign up and receive $10 free credit to get started building your AI applications. $10 is plenty to get you through this notebook and probably 10 more notebooks, depending on the size of your training file. But generally training is a little bit more expensive than general inference, but their models are super cheap. If you use Mistral, I think it's 50 cents for 1 million tokens. So that's like 2 or 3 dictionaries, 4 or 5, maybe a lot more than that.
How many
novels.
seasons of Rick and Morty?
Like maybe 10x, which currently exists. Not enough.
But no, you're totally right, Ken. And this is such an interesting point to underline. So these models, especially when fine-tuned, are almost as good as ChatGPT 4 for specific uses. And they cost something like 100th or 1,000th of the cost per token.
Yeah, I personally really like working with Mistral. It just has a more, I don't want to use the word human, but when ChatGPT kind of has like this like rigid kind of feel to it. It says sort of like, it has this style to it that's almost like very chatbot and bot-like. Whereas Mistral kind of feels more loose, a bit more verbose in its vocabulary, but not necessarily always in the length of responses. And it seems to perform just as good as 3.5. And then, of course, you could train it with like 100 examples, and it could probably perform as good as GPT-4 on, the test that you trained it on. So it's really powerful if you have some training data that you could run on it.
I have to say, too, it's something I'm still kind of wrapping my head around fully, especially on like a quantitative level. But the fine-tuning, not of the Mistral models, but of the Mixtral models, that would be the sort of Mistral mixture of experts system where it's actually 8 different 7 billion parameter Mistral models working together. Yeah, so the fine-tuning of those mixture models feels very different than the fine-tuning of a single model. When you're fine-tuning a single model, you sometimes get this feeling that you're kind of trying to push it in different directions, and maybe think of it as like trying to squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube. Like the more you kind of push it over this way, the more it kind of goes out that way. But in the mixture of experts model, on a contributing model by contributing model basis, you can really optimize the tuning in a single direction, and then it sort of adds up to a really kind of flexible positive intelligence. And so anyway, it just goes to show you teamwork makes the dream work, you guys.
Yeah, so once you've signed up for Anyscale, you should get an email that's going to give you a link to get into your account. You should get to this page, which is like their console. You go down to the credentials tab here, and you could generate a new credential. You name the credential whatever you want. I think I named mine like, I'll just name this one whatever, and then it's going to generate it. So I'm going to revoke this one since you guys saw it, and I don't want you stealing my free $10. But that's all it takes. And then once you do that, you're going to go back into that notebook. It is not going to contain, at least it should not contain, my API key. You're going to add Anyscale _ API key, all caps, _ API _ key, sorry. And then your API key right there. And to access that key, you could run this code. It's from Google.collab, import user data, and it's userdata.get, and then the name of your key. And that will print out your key, by the way. So I'm not going to run that because you're just going to see my key while I'm streaming. But just going a little bit down the file here, you could see I commented it out. And then this little checkbox shows that it worked. And I'm creating a client that we're going to work with to use AnyScale. What I think I mentioned last time is really nice about AnyScale is that it is the same API framework that OpenAI uses for their models. So if you've done something with OpenAI before, you could actually just do that again, but with AnyScale, Llama, Mistral, or whatever other models they currently have available there.
And for those of you who are developers, this is just such an important pattern to keep in mind. You can sort of prototype for a client using ChatGPT models, and 90+% of the code you write will fully transfer to open models. And in a lot of situations, for prototype purposes, ChatGPT is so good, but then when it comes to cost and then the level of specificity you can get from fine tuning, I think for many use cases for production scale, you really will want to use open models. So it just provides like a very low friction, low tech debt path to kind of using open models on projects.
Yeah, exactly. So this is exactly how you would call it with OpenAI as well. The difference would be that if you weren't using AnyScale in your client, which is really only defined by, sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit, guys. Only defined by this base URL here and using the AnyScale key instead of the OpenAI key. You can use Llama, but otherwise you would have GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 there. And this is the example of using the chat completions API to generate a response from a model. So right now I have to debug this training set a little bit. It does require that we have a validation set to train the model. So I need to split the data set and create that validation set. So that'll just take me a few minutes. Feel free to start going through the notebook, trying it out yourself. Let us know if you have any questions, and I'll kind of be live coding, talking through this as I go. Hey. No, you don't need to put in your payment info. You just need to create an account, and you have $10 free.
I tried to use the key that was generated, but it says please set up payment info to use this function.
Can you pass my mic on?
Oh.
This one. No, I think the other one.
Do we need a wireless mic down here? Yes, it's heavy. So I got this error saying please set up payment info to use this functionality.
That's interesting. Do you know if fine tuning requires you to have a separate payment, or are you just talking about using chat completions?
No, this is for AnyScale endpoint.
Right.
Are
At
you
what
getting
point in
this
the
on,
code did you get that
initializing
error?
the client or doing a particular client call? I think is what Ken's curious about.
So this was with the client where we are using the base URL for API endpoints at AnyScale, and that's using the API key that I just generated with $10 free credits. So it's still saying that I need to add payment info.
Just to be clear, it's saying that on client init or on one of the calls from the client. Like it can't establish the client, or is it getting that when the client tries to do a specific thing?
Yeah, it is saying when clients tries to create a file with converted train Rick and Morty JSON.
Got it. So that's interesting. It could be that it's the fine tuning that wants payment. I'm surprised by that. I mean, I would say too, it might very well be worth putting in payment information just because it is a very good service. It's very useful. I don't think it'll cost too much.
He's right. So when I commented out the other code, I think it's that the $10 free dollars is not allowed to be used on fine tuning, which is kind of like, isn't that $10 free dollars? But anyway, okay. So that's good to know.
I mean, I think it's very possible too. There are like training deployments of the 70 billion that might cost $10. I don't know. Like I think a lot of them I was doing were costing like $4 or $5 for the fine tunes.
Maybe we want to consider creating a how do you I'm fine to go through it still and set up my payment info. Obviously we don't have to require anyone to pay for any skill.
Yeah, if you wanted to do that, I would certainly go halvesies on whatever it was. I'm open to kind of whatever. I wouldn't be surprised too. I have a meeting with AnyScale this week if I couldn't get us some community creds for the project for next Sunday.
That would be sweet.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Yeah, in the meantime, whatever you think would be the best way to approach it.
Okay. I'm gonna have to temporarily stop screen mirroring so you guys don't steal my credit card information.
If you guys want to go to, I can get this to you later, but if you mind hanging, I'll just be a second.
Yeah.
I get it.
We're just gonna check.
I'll be so fast, Bosh. Thank you, sir. Forgive me.
We're not rushing.
There's no rush at all.
You got one?
Wait, no, I'm not joke. Yes, sorry. Okay. Knock, Who's there? No, wait. That's not a joke. Oh my God. You gotta say knock, knock. I gotta say. You gotta say knock, knock who? Knock, knock who? Knock, knock who? You guys are fake.
All good. You need anything in here? Thank you guys so much. No, stop. It's all good. I'll be able to replace the boards perfectly. Thank you guys for coming. So good to see you guys. Of course, I'll be in touch. We'll follow up. Mary, give me a call. Good to see you, Mary. I'll catch you soon. Be safe.
Bye, Mary.
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I'll follow up too with the details and make sure to connect with John. You guys have a safe trip back up. I'll catch you soon.
Yeah, it's weird that dataset doesn't have a
Hey, Ken.
split.
All right, so Rene Descartes walks into a bar. Goes up to the bartender. Bartender says, "Hey, sir, would you like a drink?" Descartes says, I think not. And he disappears. I'm a really big fan of like bad philosophy jokes.
Tell me about it.
Well, it all started in college, Ken. So it is really interesting though. And Saint, we were kind of talking about this, like sort of what can you do with prompting and prompting systems? What can you do with fine tuning? Have you heard of RAG?
Yeah, I use that because I have stories. I have like an entire story that all the booths pull from, so it uses RAG to get like relevant info from the story and each backstory of each booth. Exactly. Like all the info is accurate.
Exactly, and so that's what RAG does, is it creates a longer term memory. So for example, if you wanted to create AI characters that could be part of a world, you would sort of like create a RAG system that had history information about the world they were in. And you could even do really interesting stuff, like, sometimes you might want a certain character to know a secret, right? So you'd put that only in that character's RAG system. But anyway, how all these different things interact is honestly just one of the most interesting questions in the space, and we're still like learning so much more. Until recently, a lot of people thought that it was sort of like you either do fine tuning or you do RAG, and you sort of make that decision based on the circumstance. But then people have actually learned that when you do both, the intelligence kind of multiplies. The fine-tuned learning figures out better how to process the stuff that the RAG picks up, and then kind of vice versa. Yeah, really fun, and I think that will be one of the cool things is maybe as a next layer we'll add some RAG functionality to the system.
Yeah, so I got a little distracted because I realized that Pickle Rick is in this data set. And
I feel like it's very important to factor out Pickle Rick. At least that was my take on that episode. I'm just kidding.
yeah, it seems like they have like the entire strips from the first season with every character in them.
This actually does open up kind of a whole conversation about building these things. Because think about it this way. Like, how many comments have you said in Discord to various people over the past year? It's way more than is needed for a fine-tuning set. And in many cases, like, advances in this field have been made where, like, there was a fine-tuning set that maybe had 50,000 entries, and then a team figured out some way to throw away the 20,000 worst entries, and the quality of the model went way up because it still had enough examples, but then the average quality of the examples went a lot higher. So how you sort of like take a certain payload and sort of find the right things, maybe characterize some of the prompts based on, for example, was this Pickle Rick or not, and then sort of start to learn the dimensions and the character of the data set. I almost think that this is a thing that has so much sophistication to it that it's like musical, in the sense that you really want your data set to be a piano where the different parts of the data set and you can kind of press them and, kind of make the pattern that you need. And then, sort of like getting the best AI comes to sort of like trying different combinations of keys and like sort of seeing how it sounds. Gaurav, did you have a question? I see you with the microphone.
Yeah, I'm running into another error actually.
Let's figure it out. That's what we do at Hack Sunday.
All right. So the error I'm getting is each message list should have at least one message with the role assistant.
I have system commented out, but if you go to because I was just trying to inspect the JSON L, and it was hard to read it because the system was much longer. But I think if you just comment that back in and uncomment the empty system message, that should resolve that error.
And system prompts are interesting too, because that's sort of something that sets the context. So last model I was fine-tuning was a SQL model, so one where you could tell it what database query you want to make, and it would write your database query for you. And so for that one, the system prompt was like, you are an expert system that helps people write SQL, and kind of setting the prompt context for what the response should be. So for ours, like, we're going to have to come up with a system prompt that says, like, you are an LLM that exists to, create Rick and Morty scripts, and create authentic Rick and Morty scripts that will be funny and sound like the characters. But yeah, it's just very interesting. The system prompt, even though it's just a very small thing, has just enormous impact on how the model will behave. So just let us know if commenting that out works properly. The format of the fine-tuning payload is relatively simple. And yeah, Ken, I actually think, anyone here seen Mr. JSON? Mr. JSON? One of my favorite new Python packages. It's a beautiful package for visualizing and interacting with JSON schema, like in the notebook. So I'm gonna get a Mr. JSON going in here so we can take a close look at the
All right.
the structure next time. But yeah, basically right there you can see sort of like what a single. Do people know JSON-L? It's it's a kind of a format that's becoming kind of interesting, and it's basically a list of JSON elements. That's the JSON-L. So it's like line by line JSON elements, and it's typically used when you have something like a fine-tuning set where each example is stored in a isomorphic JSON payload, and so the structure of the data set essentially is just a list of structured JSON objects. Exactly.
Okay, so we split the data set up. Now I'm going to create new output files for each one.
I really want to do a thing where like you have LLMs talking to each other, and then based on what happens in the conversation, they create fine-tuning sets for the other model, and then you fine-tune them and they start talking to each other again. Like I'm kind of curious like what would happen if you had models actually able to train each other that way. And then another thing that's very cool about this is it does open up the possibility of like doing AI agents work, because it is so easy to do like easy and inexpensive to do an inference call on these things. So like just for example, on our medical AI project, we're training models on some fairly distinct data sets. We have one that's trained on genetic papers. We have one that's trained on just kind of like information about pharmaceuticals. So you could almost think you could do like an AI medical board meeting where you had the different AIs talking to each other and like evaluating a patient and each giving their opinions. Really a lot of fun, sort of like the systems you can build with these tools.
All right, so fingers crossed that this will work this time. Guess you could use llama. Oops, wait, there's something wrong there. Training file ID. I didn't close that. Oh. I did set up my payment info.
Anyone ever written a JSON parser in C?
Gaurav, did you set up your payment info?
Yeah.
Did it give you the same error?
Yep.
Same here.
Yeah, it's just giving that error saying I tried your way to commenting out the system one. Now it says each message should have a valid role, either system, user, or assistant. It's not happy with being role as Rick or Morty, I guess.
That's what I was afraid of. Okay.
Oh, so it didn't want
because
those
I think
custom roles.
OpenAI's API now requires the role to be user or assistant. You used to be able to change the role to anything you wanted. I think you just have to, it was the original way I was going to do it, but I was kind of hoping this would work, append the name to the front of the message.
Okay.
And what, like, I guess if you wanted to do it kind of more of a structured output, we could use structured JSON output to like parse it without having the name in here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So we should just switch back the Rick Morty to whatever the structure was, like user, agent, or whatever.
So up in cell.
Do you still have a good example there of the original format? Or you're going to do, okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm going to change the format here.
And Gaurav, just kind of to share the train of happenings. So I was originally thinking we would train a Rick model and a Morty model separately. Ken was sharing that because you can actually do like different users in the training payload, then maybe we could train a single model that would understand the Rick context and the Morty context and be able to speak as both Rick and Morty, which would obviously have some cool benefits. But yeah, it looks like they've kind of changed the way the API works, and so we'll probably train a Rick model and then a Morty model separately. I kind of think for doing agent stuff, that'll actually be better. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. And anyway, Garo, thank you so much for getting this troubleshot. You know, we'll put a couple more troubleshooting bullet holes in it, and then we'll be off to the races.
So I'm just updating the system prompt to grab the name, so we always know, so we always have in the system prompt who is actually speaking as the user.
It's kind of funny we live in a culture where like the main phrase for fixing something is a reference to shooting it.
What do you mean it wasn't closed?
Problem. No, all good. Did you look at that thing at all, or it's not a problem if you didn't at all?
What's that?
Did you look at that thing at all, or?
Yeah, that looks. So what did you want me to do with it?
Oh, if you don't, I was wanting to swap in the 3090.
Do you have it?
Well, the 3090 is in the machine up there. But if you got to run, don't worry about it. I can probably do it myself.
This thing done, and then hopefully I can get back here.
Yeah, but we might, it's getting back into Super Bowl time. No,
I opened this up and it was like, oh,
I think I can probably do it myself even. I'm not too worried. So, but have a good time. We'll figure it out.
it's not gonna be a good time, but I'll get him back on. I'll see you later.
You go, Super Dad.
He is, man. For the whole community, I gotta say, Lance is the Venice OG.
I don't know why it's giving me this error that's saying that this was not closed. Maybe it's just collab being a little weird. Let's see what happens.
And if you want me to find like a sample well-structured JSON payload, I can share that too.
Oh, was it? Do I not have a comma there? I do. Oh, because it's. I got it. So now the system prompt like this should have the name of who is giving the first line, which is the prompt, and then the completion character. So we're basically instructing the model. You are Rick and Morty. You are a Rick and Morty dialogue generator. Given the following Morty line, respond as Rick, and it's always gonna have that combo. And then the user would be the prompt or the Morty line, and then the assistant would be the completion that we're expecting because we're asking the assistant to respond as Morty. And so the completion we're getting is the Morty line. So I'm hoping that's good enough because that prevents us from having to go back to the original transformation on the data file and adding the name to where we're currently injecting the context. So that would be kind of like adding the string Morty or Rick to the prompt and completion. I don't really want to do that because I think the model will start to generate that when it talks, which I don't really want it to do. So if we could define who's talking in the system prompt, we might be able to avoid that. So that's kind of what I'm hoping here. Though I still don't know if we're fixing that error with the payments thing. So we'll see in a second.
Gurov and Ken too, also on Discord, I shared with you guys what a well-structured JSON element should look like, just as a reference. But I think what you have in the notebook now is also correct, Ken. So just
Yeah, it's still giving me that payments error though, which I really don't get because unless I run out of. I know what I did. Okay, we're gonna set up a new credential because I think I just add my payments info to the new account that I created to show you guys, which does not match the current API key that I've used there. So let's try a new one. Generate credential. Rick and Morty. Create. Copy. And then update my keys. Close that. Gonna restart and run all. And hopefully this now takes.
anyone worked with a DPO?
No, but I'd love to do that sometime soon because I have a use case.
Oh yeah, I think we'll have an early DPO example for next time. It's kind of like a different approach to doing fine tuning. The type of fine tuning we're looking at, you give it examples of given you're asked this, here's what you should say. DPO.
Worked.
Okay, sir.
All right. So
We cooking?
we're cooking. So I don't know how long these jobs usually take. Usually it's a few minutes.
So really cool. So okay, and once again, to just kind of high level this, Ken took the Rick and Morty data set and he used this pre-processing script, which everyone should have access to. That structures it in the form AnyScale wants, and then what he's done here is he's sent over the data set with a request for a fine-tuning job. So there you can see, like in the response, all of the information about the fine-tuning job. So it has an ID, it was created at a certain time, so far no error. The model that we're tuning, you can see there it's meta llama / llama to 7 billion. So not the 70 billion model, which is the more powerful model that we have available, but this is a smaller model that will train faster. The selection of a model to the tasks you want to perform is actually a really interesting question. The 7 billion model here is the one I was using to train a SQL assistant that would convert from English to SQL queries. And it's sort of like the simplicity of that task relatively is sort of enough, is low enough that the 7 billion model can learn it really well. So sort of like understanding the complexity of what you want a model to do and then using that to select which is the best model, a really interesting part of using these things as tools. And then
I give this a try.
and then right here is the chat completion call. So again, this is one where you sort of tell it what model you want to talk to, and then it lets you talk to that model. And then basically once we finish a fine-tuning, the model we fine-tune now lives on AnyScale, and we can talk to it. So as soon as this fine-tuning is done, this here will do what we're hoping it will do, generate Rick and Morty text. I think that the fact that we used here the 7 billion rather than the 70 billion, it will be a little underwhelming. Or at the very least, when you start talking to it, you'll realize it's not fully aware of the context of the conversation. But anyway, will be a very interesting thing to iterate on for next time. I think for next time, we'll have a few actual conversations between two 70 billion models.
Oh, no, I got an error. Okay, what happened?
It could be that it's not done fine-tuning. I'm actually curious. It might be worth running a training status.
Unable to find requested model.
Yeah, it looks like it's still
Okay.
still doing the tuning.
Okay, so I could just where's the status here?
I think there's like in the original notebook I shared, there's
Status pending. Okay.
there's
got
a
it.
call to.
But there's no like Yeah, because it's
Like I actually think if you
status
just even
running.
if you just
okay,
even
so it's currently
if you
running.
if you just run that again, it should. Like where's the status?
Status is right
running.
here,
Yeah,
running.
yeah, it's not done yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the training time directly related to the size? So 70 would be 10 times?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
also the-
directly related, but not linearly.
Okay.
It also is a function of the fine tuning size as well.
Yeah, are you able to define how many epochs we use? Like I noticed it just says hyperparameters we didn't put any in, but it just says number of epochs and context length. There's nothing for batch size or learning rate, so I'm guessing they have that already in there.
Yeah,
Included.
and actually, excitingly, the AnyScale framework supports many different hyperparameters. For people who haven't heard the word before, we talk about parameters like this model has 7 billion parameters. Those are like the numbers that store the intelligence. But then hyperparameters are like parameters that exist on a kind of level above the parameters of the model, and they serve to kind of change the general behavior of the model. The one that I think is really cool to give an idea about why hyperparameters are worth learning about is temperature. Because we remember that these things are statistical brains, right? Like they, given the text up to this point, they predict the next word, and they're just extremely good at that problem. Temperature determines how much, call it flexibility they have in selecting the next word. Like in the sense that do they always pick the number one suggested word, or do they sometimes allow the number two word to be part of it? When you tweak the temperature, it sort of is like tweaking the creativity or the unpredictability of the model, which is really interesting because, yeah, sometimes like maybe you're seeing that the model's saying weird stuff and you're like, I'm going to turn the temperature down on that guy a little bit. Or sometimes maybe it's just kind of saying boring stuff and it's not properly responding to some of the dimensions of the input text. And in that case, you might turn the temperature up a little bit. But anyway, here under this hyperparameters call, there's actually a whole universe of different parameters that you can learn about that allow you to have this like finer control over the type of intelligence you create. So yeah, next time we'll be talking much more about the hyperparameters. But for now, Ken, I think their default settings are quite good.
Cool. Yeah, we're still running. I wonder if we could see anything on it. And so when I was checking on AnyScale before, it did look like okay, cool. So you can see in the GUI that there is a little dial here turning that your fine tuning is running. It shows you how long it's currently running. And if you hit this create button here too, which I think is kind of cool, you could actually use their GUI to do a fine tuning job, create the model, and then just like access the model via this output model string right here. So you don't even have to, like if you created your data set or grab your data set from someone else who created it, you could just drag it and drop it in there and call your model. So that's really cool because if like someone created a data set, maybe didn't train a model or maybe doesn't want to share the exact model and access, I'm not even sure if you can share a model that you've created under your own account. You might have to share the data set, but
I think you can make the model available, and then obviously like you can build it into products, accessing it through the API.
Mm-hmm.
But then also AnyScale is really worth celebrating as a very open platform. You can fluidly take models you've trained off of the platform and use them yourself in other situations.
Oh, so you could access the weights and everything?
They're your models, they're your weights, and AnyScale actually has
I
some
didn't
of
even
the
know that.
most robust policies around data privacy, in the sense that like I personally assume anything I send to OpenAI they're using for training models, and but
Even though they say
AnyScale
they're not,
very specifically will not use your data or the models you work with for anything like that.
Another real cool thing I'll say about AnyScale is that I'm working on a startup where we're using function calling and streaming together. And I tried to switch to AnyScale so we could have open source models, and they found out that AnyScale does not currently support, while they support streaming and they support function calling, they do not support them both together. Because there's a bit of a different process that you have to use when you do streaming and function calling together. That was a problem for me because that's what my current code is set up to do with OpenAI, so I couldn't just swap over. I emailed them, I was like, hey, do you guys not support this? I'm getting this like external server error, don't really have a lot of information. They're like, oh, we don't actually currently support it, but it's in the works, our engineers are working on it now. I was like, oh, okay, any ETA on how long that will take? Be like, oh, just a couple weeks. It's like, oh my God, like great. like awesome. Just all I have to do is sit around for a couple weeks and I could run my code again and it's gonna work. So they're like, I'm sure they're making very good money doing what they're doing. And that's probably why they could contribute to the open source community like that. But I just thought that was so awesome because usually like for something like that, like I'm not even much of a paying customer. I think at the time I was still using the $10 that they gave me. So like the fact that they were like, yeah, we're like on this and it's going to ship it pretty soon is really awesome.
Yeah, Anyscale, a badass company. Their Slack community also excellent, like really cool high level conversations. I participate in their Slack a lot and just some really good conversations, a really good place to learn. And again, huge fanboy, like, I consult and the clients are upset because I'm too biased for Anyscale. But yeah, in terms of like creating Ray, in terms of kind of the role they play in the ecosystem, yeah, super urge anyone who's a developer who's interested in this stuff to check them out, to check out Ray. Yeah, Ken, they got a big funding round, and then most interestingly though too is I'm so very curious about sort of what their business looks like on the enterprise level. Because yeah, for example, like OpenAI, I think relies on Ray for their reinforcement learning.
Yeah.
So
we're still going. This is a good learning because that file is only about 450 records, and that's taken about 10 minutes so far. So generally, when you're going to do fine-tuning, you may want to start with a much smaller number of records and kind of work your way up, and kind of thinking about the quality of the data. What is the, like, especially if you have a very, very large data set that you want to train on and you're not really sure like how useful it's going to be. Let's start with 100 like really good examples, and then you could kind of build up from there. Also, something fun that I've done with large data sets, if you have a large data set and you know what the 100 examples are, you could kind of iteratively feed that to GPT and have it rank other examples, and then grab the ones that are the top ranked to build your data set kind of from the bottom up.
Oh man, you spoiled it because I was actually thinking of doing this as part of next week. Because like again, like we're going to be generating a Rick and Morty script from these agents talking to each other. So imagine like we do just what Ken says. We take the script that was generated by our AIs, and then we have ChatGPT read each section and rank it 1 to 10. How good is this as a Rick and Morty script?
Yeah, exactly.
And so again, like this is actually, if anyone has followed, the company Mistral, it's believed that like this is why they're getting such performance, is they're doing some very sophisticated things using systems of AI agents to create synthetic data sets that almost like distill the highest quality data from a very large pool. And then again, it gets really weird because then it's like, could we maybe like gather data that is reflective of the opinions of the best cartoon critics or people who are talking about criticism and discussion of cartoons, and then like fine tune a model that's specialized in finding the best Rick and Morty examples. It's just really amazing how like, building these systems, figuring out how to jointly optimize across all the different intelligences is really almost like a whole new type of engineering that's like just materializing as possible.
Just a quick troubleshooting question. I'm getting this weird error saying there is no such file called valid JSON L.
Did you, on which call? For the training call, upload training payloads?
Yes.
And
There should be a call that writes it to the file, right?
It does. There's a few more lines up, right above Anyscale training. There's two separate, with open train output file as out file. The W is for write. I may have shared a version of the file that had not split things out yet, or maybe missed something. There's also make sure you're connected to Google Drive at the top here, where you mount Google Drive so it could access those files.
Yeah.
And
I've
then I
already
think
mounted,
if you click this file folder right here, you could see which files you currently have in here. So you might want to check the names of those files, that they exist as they are spelled out here. Because as long as you've done that, this should be sufficient to grab the file by name that exists in here. As it should already be added to path in collab.
so it looks like I don't have the converted test Rick and Morty JSON-L.
Got it. Okay. Let me go back to the beginning of the file, and if you refresh the original link that I sent, you should get the updated file. I think at that time I didn't write out all that code yet because I kind of just realized that we don't have a test data set, and I had to create one myself. Usually with Hugging Face data sets, after the imports, where it says dataset equals load dataset and then the Rick and Morty dataset, you could add an argument there that says split equals train or test. But when I did test on that, it actually didn't exist. So what I did was skipping down to transformations, and then under transformations, train test split. I use scikit-learn, sklearn. Not scikit, so that's the other package. Model selection, import train test split to quickly create my train and test data sets. Just a few lines of code there. Stanley, how's training time generally on a 70 billion compared to like a 7 billion parameter model?
Yeah, good question. And again, like question before was, is it 10x? And I don't think it is. Like I think it's significantly less than 10x with the same payloads. But I have actually noticed the biggest variability from payload size. Like doing a 1,000 example payload versus like a 10,000 example payload is a big difference.
Yeah,
Really big difference.
so that might be, we have a 450 examples. So I kind of didn't think about reducing the example size before we just shot out and went for
it's
training.
all good,
So
and
it shouldn't be, yeah,
it
it's not that
happens.
many,
But let's check it out. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it is getting pretty close to done.
it probably is. It doesn't let you really see where you're at. Like the status does not even say like which epoch you're on. Like I don't know what the default is. I'm guessing like 4. But it just kind of result files. Yeah, epochs none. It doesn't say which epoch you're on. So when I have train files on OpenAI's API before, it usually says like which epoch you're on, and it will kind of just like update you, but it doesn't seem to do that. But let me check something, because there is some other code I believe that we can use to check the status of training. Oh, they auto-calculate epochs based on the training dataset size. That's cool. OpenAI SDK. Fine-tuning job retrieve. Cancel the job. Job scheduling. What we're running. currently is retrieve. Retrieve content. Okay, we could try that. Okay. This is the other code we could try. So if we run result file ID client.finetuning.jobs.retrieve with the job ID, grab that. Dot result files, grabbing the first item, and then client.files.retrieve content with the result file ID, we should get the current epoch. Okay, so it's at epoch 0 with the first iteration of training. Oh wait, no, I think this is showing a lot more. Okay, cool. Oh, sweet. Okay. Where are we? Maybe I want to do display this to make it look nicer. Not really. I'm gonna pretty print it so it looks a little better. If you ever use pretty print, it can be useful. Guess not so much here.
How large is the training set again? How many lines?
450 examples. Okay. So it's nothing crazy, really. But I think to Stanley's point, that's what I asked. The parameter size of the model you're training on is going to impact the amount of time it takes to train. So we trained on a 70 billion parameter llama model. Anyscale has the 7 billion and 13 billion Mistral models available, which will probably train quite a bit faster if you wanted to switch to those. In their docs, they also guides, query models. Here are the chat models. So they have Mistral 7 billion. They have the Mixtral, which is the mixture of experts model using the 7 billion parameter model. Code Llama. Oh, that's neat. They just added Code Llama. That's new. So Code Llama just came out, I believe, unless that's an older one. And then they have Llama 70 billion, 13 billion, and 7 billion here, as well as some embedding models. Let's see how good this Copilot is.
Hey Ken.
Hey.
For any scale to like start your job, what's like a normal wait duration?
To start the job?
Yeah.
Have you tried rerunning this line again? It still says waiting to start.
Yeah, it still says pending.
What does it say on the
Uh,
on this end? Their
on the UI, it shows pending, and it has like a orange line over there.
huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm not sure. This one started like pretty much right away. But I don't know if there's like a certain number of batches they do at a time, or if
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if there would be like some way to understand like what's the queue, how long will it take? I think that
Let's see if they have something for that over here. Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. You want to close this out?
All right. All right, guys. So I think we're going to pause it here and we're
Sure.
going to continue next week. We should have a trained model next week, and we'll be able to use that model to create distinct chatbots for Rick and Morty characters. And I'll show you how to kind of create a system where they're just talking back and forth, and we could just sort of watch what happens when we set the scene for Rick and Morty. Awesome. Cool. Thanks, everyone.